I literally never read a prologue on principle alone. If it's that important, it should be in the book.
What? But it is in the book. At the front. That's how you know it's important. It's so important, it has its own special place right at the beginning.
I agree. I feel like it's stuff that wasn't good enough to be in the book.
It is. It is in the book. It's in the book. The stuff that wasn't good enough to be in the book was actually just not in the book. That's called editing.
Prologue and epilogues are usually just author's yap.
What else is writing but author yap? What do you think the rest of the book is? The author finally shutting up for once?
Agreed. What the fuck else could you possibly be telling me in an intro that couldn't be included in the 300 pages of the book?
It is in the book. It's included in the page count. It's listed in the table of contents. It's page 1. If there's one thing you can say about the reader community on TikTok, it's that it loves books. Now, do they all love reading those books? That's a horse of a different color. BookTok, as it's known by readers and perverts alike, definitely loves the idea of books for the aesthetic, or at least the idea of being a voracious reader for the street cred. A book slut, if you'll forgive my French Canadian. But I'm not sure if that's the same thing. Here's something that I find legit interesting. But also, here's another thing I find interesting that's actually related to this video. If you open up TikTok right now and search BookTok, what you're going to find is, well, if you ignore the softcore porn and focus on the book part of BookTok, you'll find an aesthetic that is often immaculate. I love it. You're going to find someone sitting in a window seat with rain streaking down the glass behind them, holding a book with a broken spine and dog-eared pages, a candle burning just out of focus. You're going to find color-coded annotation systems that look like what I imagine a dissertation would look like if it weren't the 1,000-word one I wrote at Magic Psychic School. You'll find people genuinely excited about books, and I love that. And I would rather not be dismissive of that, because on its cute little face, this is dope as hell, right? Reading is cool now. Books are trending. There are dedicated book talk tables at actual bookshops, which if you told someone in 2008 that the internet would eventually make the youth excited about buying actual books, they would have called you a stupid bitch. I was a sicko for reading for pleasure when I had leisure time. I was walking my gay ass into lampposts after getting my Scholastic book order in and being unable to look up from my Animorph books while walking down the street. Actually, I guess my head trauma goes back very far. But yeah, people that excited about books, this should always be a good thing. And that thought keeps rattling around in my head because it seems incongruent with what is actually happening. I have a problem where when I'm fascinated by something, I have to talk about it. And I live alone, so you're my roomie now, roomie. And we're going to have a little slumber party chit-chat. I'm not trying to do a kids these days thing, and I'm in no way gatekeeping reading because I barely even have time to read anything for pleasure anymore. And probably have too much anxiety about money to ever do anything but work from 4 a.m. until I go to bed after my night meal. But also because I think it deserves a tad more nuance than these people are fake reading posers. BookTok has developed an entire visual language and aesthetic identity around the act of reading. It has made reader into a personality type, an entire identity, a zodiac sign, and a brand. But the more I look at it, the more I actually dig into it and take it in, like a cat does to their owner after them dies in bed, the more I notice these trends. And this leads me to go down rabbit holes, like a cat does when they're chasing a rabbit, where I have to read with my eyes the things people say, not just out loudly, but proudly, about their reading habits. The more I start to wonder whether BookTok is actually about reading, or whether it's about something else entirely. Because when people are telling you they skip the beginning and the ends of books, that they skip anything that isn't dialogue, that they won't read unless it's in first person, that their favorite books of the year are obvious AI slop with the worst prose you've ever read, it does beg, like a good boy, for closer inspection. Because if you're doing all that, what are you actually reading? Like, what is the book you read? Because it isn't the book the author wrote. In some cases, it's not a book any author wrote. I think something really interesting has happened to our relationship with reading. I think the rise of short-form content has done something to our ability to sit inside a story. And I think BookTok, by nature of existing on TikTok, a platform that is essentially a machine designed to destroy your attention span, has responded to that not by pushing back against it, but by redefining what reading means. And in doing so, I think it's shifted the entire point of it. Reading has, for most of my life, been a bit of a private experience. Whatever happens between those pages was between me, the author, and God, he/herself. And then as a little bonus, maybe I was lucky enough to have friends who had read the same books, and I could gush about them to someone else. I used to try and shove Animorphs down the throat of anyone willing to read about a bunch of furry child soldiers. What did K.A. Applegate put in those? Was it crack? Was Catherine selling crack to kids? Our parents were so worried about checking our trick-or-treat bags, but they never even thought to check the pages of our Animorphs. But now it seems like the dynamic has flipped. The book and the reading of it isn't the focus. Now the content is the purpose. The reading is the hurdle to making that content. And the faster you clear that hurdle, the sooner you can post again. And your books read this year count goes up. You get to put another notch on your bookshelf. Which is how you end up with people saying things like, prologues and epilogues are usually just author yap. Which, they're right, technically, which is the best kind of right. Because posting about reading a book, and even reading itself, would be so much faster without all the author yap. Just like how this video would be shorter without all my incessant yap. And so, for the rest of this video, I shall be quiet. I'm sorry, but author yap is so funny. What do you think the whole fucking book is? Part 1. Attention span in the toilet. Short-form content has done something to our little brains. Well, just some of us. I blame tweets at first, but then Vines and TikToks and Reels and Shorts. Actually, now we don't even have to read a tweet. We can go to TikTok and someone will be standing in front of it reading it for us. Like how a mama bird chews poop for its young. Plenty of studies say the average attention span has been measurably shrinking over the last 2 decades, in a trajectory that maps pretty neatly onto the rise of social media, and then specifically the rise of short-form content. But it's not that simple. Researcher Gloria Mark, author of Attention Span, said to Nat Geo this year,
Data from our first study in 2003 revealed that people spent an average of 2.5 minutes on something before turning their attention to a different task. Our most recent study, done over the past 5 years, shows that the figure has gone down to 40 seconds.
But she explains clearly that this doesn't mean we can only focus for 40 seconds, just that we switch focus more quickly now. But that also has to do with the nature of technology. If you're reading an article on your phone and you get a text, you likely switch out, answer it, come back. That counts as losing focus. And that does affect the way you process information. You can make the argument, I suppose, that maybe we're just bored of what we're being fed or have more to choose from, so we simply have the option to just move on until something tickles our fancies. And even though I say my attention span is shit, I can spend 7 hours writing a video essay without fucking blinking if I'm passionate about it. Maybe I just don't really like whatever shit I threw on Netflix and would rather scroll. Or maybe short-form content has fried our brains a bit, and it's both, or it's neither. But either way, TikTok clearly didn't invent this problem. But maybe it's perfecting it? The problem being, we are being trained to be stimulated in ways that are predictable, comfortable, and entertaining at all times. The way the TikTok algorithm works is that it is constantly, in real time, measuring your engagement. Not just whether you watch something, but whether you kept watching, whether you rewatched it, whether you bailed after 2 seconds. And it is learning at a very granular level exactly what keeps your eyes on the screen. And what it has learned is that the content that performs best is content that gives your brain something new to process every few seconds. A new cut or zoom in, a sound, a new piece of information from the speaker, or if not, a whole new video. And it all happens in seconds, sometimes less. Constant novelty and stimulation, and we have been stewing in it, marinating in that for years, and now we are wet and we are filled up with it. It's dripping out of our pores. And you know what? Sometimes I'm okay with that. I don't want to have to spend my fleeting years on Earth being bored. I like my dangling keys. Oh. But what happens when the person who has never really been a reader, but has spent days watching 500 individual 90-second clips of dangling keys about loving reading, about their personality being defined by reading, about how romantic and fulfilling reading makes their life? What happens when they pick up a 400-page romantasy novel and open a page 1? The prologue. Well, I think we're starting to find out. Epilogues and prologues, to me, are the equivalent to DVD bonus features, and are therefore skippable unless you're really into it. Same girl, F epilogues and F prologues. They are not the book. Bye. I have never and will never read a prologue or epilogue. That's not for me. Sorry, I'm working on my lack of patience. And maybe so should we all be, because most books that aren't for literal babies, they require it. And that's something that TikTok has been systematically training us not to have. Books require a lot more of you than a TikTok video. They ask you to hold information in your head across hundreds of pages and trust that it's going somewhere. Difficult. They ask you to be bored sometimes. Horrible. For me, with fiction, it's often in a rewarding way, though. In the way that you knew the boredom was likely the calm before the storm, or a lead up to a point that will change the way you understand something entirely. But having patience and sticking with something that isn't giving you that dopamine, isn't hitting that D spot, is a genuinely difficult thing to do when your baseline model of content consumption involves your thumb wagging every 3 seconds. This is what happens when you spend enough, or too much, time with any medium. It, in part, informs the way you process everything else. If you read nothing but academic papers for a year, you might begin to view fiction as a bit pointless. You're not even learning anything. If you watch nothing but video essays, you're probably perfectly well-adjusted and simply better than everybody else. Or maybe you've begun to feel the need to have all your information handed to you by someone you have a parasocial relationship with. Probably not, though. You're fine. And you look great today, best friend. Today's sponsor is my Patreon, where all my best friends hang out at the fun lunch table and eat dirt because we're not like other girls. We're disgusting. But where a video essay often requires you pay attention for likely too long in one sitting because they go on tangents about dirt munchers, they could be compared more closely to the experience of reading a book than watching TikTok. And the cognitive habits that TikTok builds are specifically opposed to the cognitive habits that reading requires. So one might think that this would be a barrier to entry altogether, that the people who are most deeply embedded in short-form content culture would struggle to engage with long-form reading, and that would be the end of the story. Not the epilogue, of course, which is neither part of the story, nor, apparently, the book. But that's not quite how it all worked out, which we'll get to in a cute little second after I say something once. 2 times. 1, not every single book is created around prose. 2, not every single book is created around prose. And don't make me repeat myself. There are so many genres of books out there that are pure art, from the cover to the paper choice to every single creative decision that went into it, like art books. There are very few books I think anyone should have to own, but I do have a few I think people would probably want to own. For instance, if you want a bestseller born from the passion of artists, scientists, and designers, you'll love what the sponsor of this video, Hungry Mind, sent me. It's called The Book. I love my book. It's a mix of art, science, design, history, and is 400 pages of illustrations and instructions on basically everything you'd ever want to know if you wanted to restart civilization. First of all, it's so pretty. Like, I show it to everyone who enters my home. I'm like, hey, can I take your coat? And everyone has been wowed and wooed. From my artsy friends to the technical-minded, there's a reason it was so successful on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where they raised $2.3 million to fund the artists and thinkers who put it all together. No AI involved. I think it was like 2 days into randomly picking it up and flipping through before I noticed there were occasionally what looked like messages throughout the illustrations. Being me, I immediately tried to see if I was looking at random designs or if it actually spelled something out. Apparently, there's a whole quest line inside the book that they don't mention anywhere. I spent an afternoon going through the clues, and it led me to a website, and you know what? I don't like spoilers. You can figure it out for yourself like I did. I'm not going to steal your fun, but if you're stuck starting out, start with the butterflies. I'm a huge fan of buying gifts that people can keep and treasure as opposed to more consumable products, and the book is like the epitome of that. They also have like cuter, smaller gifts, like these playing cards and these bookmarks that I'm now leaving on my coffee table too. Like this is the Hungry Minds Museum. And they're so cute when they're popping out. Look at this. You can get You and Your Friends Your Own by following the link in the description and purchase the book using my promo code for 10% off. It's Caelan10. Okay, so what happens when a bunch of people who won't watch a video longer than 3 minutes get their hands on a thick, juicy book? Because it isn't what some people would expect, that they'd throw it in the trash like a criminal little baby who drank all your bathwater. What happened instead is that BookTok emerged as this enormous, thriving, often horny, but super enthusiastic community of people who identify as readers, who are buying books at a rate that is propping up certain corners of the publishing industry, who have made reading aesthetically and socially rewarding in a way it maybe hasn't ever been before. I would know for sure on the last point. History books are too boring to read, and I skip the parts that aren't dialogue. Wasn't very good. And all these changes feel like good news. Like God has looked down at us, saw that all the little homo sapiens they made were not doing great, and decided to make reading cool enough that people would push through it and learn to enjoy books as art and reading as entertainment. But I don't think that's necessarily what happened either, because if you look at what BookTok actually celebrates, the content that performs well, the habits that get normalized, the things that people say out loud about how they read, there's a pattern there. And the pattern suggests that many of these people didn't really overcome the tension between short-form consumption and long-form reading. I think a bunch of people just reworked what being a reader or what loving to read even means. Because there's a difference between loving books and loving to read. And it's starting to become apparent that many people who say they love reading actually mean they love buying, possessing, and displaying books. And nothing makes me feel this way more than the number of videos posted about what is known as a TBR pile. Part 2. I love stuff too. If you're not familiar, the TBR pile is the to be read pile or list, and the TBR pile is a beloved institution, a stack of books that you usually own and definitely intend to read, a backlog. This is a totally normal thing that readers have always had. You buy a book, you don't read it immediately, it goes in the pile. Fine, relatable, I have one. Most readers do. It's even easier now with e-readers because they just, pile up. You don't even have to see them there judging you. But on BookTok, the TBR pile seems to have become something else. There are entire videos, which perform well, that are just hauls. Someone has bought 14 books and they're showing them to you one by one, and the comments are full of people saying, adding this to my TBR, and I need all of these. And the video has nothing to do with whether any of these books are good or whether the person making it has read any of them. It's about the acquisition in part, but mostly about the having, the owning. It's about possession of a product and the aesthetic of having a stack of status symbols that say, I not only read, I read a lot. I'm a reader. I'm going down to Reado Street to tell President John Chrétien I'm a readist. And when you buy a book just to own and display a book, it is functioning less like a text to be read, more like a Funko Pop with words trapped inside of it that no one may ever read. A representation of a person's personal aesthetic or brand that says, this is what I like. This is who I is. I think at this point in my life, I probably love books more than I love reading, and I think that's fine. And I've decided to believe that that's because I barely have time to read anything but nonfiction, and only for work these days. And I have so little time to do even that. I have to throw that in on top of working 8 to 16-hour days, 6 days a week. I don't think so. I'm definitely not doing it on Sundays. I take those days to relax, cry, vomit a little blood, and walk my sciatica. With nonfiction, I have very little patience. I just want to gobble it right up. And if there was a way to take academic nonfiction books and just download the whole thing into my brain, I would. Because I want to learn, I want to understand, I want to know more than I know, and I want it to happen now. Because the purpose of my reading them is to consume the information. When it comes to memoirs or fiction, which is the main form of content shared on BookTok, I really do want to experience it as the author intended. As slow and painstaking as that could be. I want to feel the build-up. I want to sit in whatever sick emotion they're trying to force onto me through the prose. I want to read every single word and let it touch me however and wherever it wants. I want it inside of me, slow or fast, no words refused. No words refused merch when? Anyway, that's what I mean when I say I love reading. When I say I love books as a general noun, I mean something else entirely. A book is an object, it's property, it's almost always a product, and some of them are the most beautiful pieces of art before you even begin to read them. I am absolutely gagged and gooped by a gorgeous hardcover. So much so that, and here is my little what the fuck did you just say bitch reader moment, I throw every single book jacket directly in the trash. Yep, you heard me. The second I get home with my new book, I spin around holding it like I'm that snobby French bestiality princess, and then I take off the book jacket, spit on it like we're on Brokeback Mountain, and shove it in the garbage where it belongs. I also judge a book by its cover. You can't stop me. It's called ignorance and it's bliss. Jealous. No, but for real, it's like not only by its cover, but it's a part of it. The Heated Rivalry books, hideous. Looks like clip art to me. Sorry to the person who made those, but so I remade my own cover. You know why? Because I can do fucking anything. Of course, then I actually read them, and the show is great. Really good show. Jacob Tierney did a lot with what he had. What was I talking about? Right. Being horned up for books. I love the smell of a book. I love cracking its hot little spine. I love the feeling of the pages as I doggy them. I love the way they look sitting on my desk, doing absolutely nothing but carrying the entire vibe. I truly understand the adoration people have for books as pieces of art that live in your home, completely independent of the art that lives inside the books themselves. When I say I love books, that's what I mean. That's the delineation between loving books and loving reading for me. When I say I love a specific book, that's usually about the content of the book itself, though. And I imagine that most people that love reading also love books. But I don't believe that everyone that loves books loves reading. Because when people spend more time talking about books they haven't read than reading books, it starts to feel a bit performative. And some people objectively spend more time highlighting and tagging and marking a book to post on TikTok than they do reading the book itself. Which again, engage in hobbies as you like. But if your whole thing is being a reader, when does the reading happen? And I guess, more importantly, on booktok, does it even have to? Because I think for a lot of people operating in this space, the answer is no. If the goal is an aesthetic, a platform, and a brand built on loving books, then no, you objectively do not need to read 90% of the books you post about. Because the book doesn't need to be read to serve its purpose. It just needs to be owned. It needs to be displayed. It needs to be talked about in the enthusiastic and aesthetically pleasing aesthetic that booktok has developed over the years. The reading is a legitimately optional part of being a reader TM. And that is, I don't know, the backdrop. Because again, my question is not actually, do they even read? Because I would guess most of them do. My question is, what happens when someone who is taken in by the beautiful aesthetic of booktok actually tries to read a book? Part 3. What is even reading? Okay, so the beginning and the end of a book are not only optional parts of the read now, but they are not even part of the book. But let's toss that aside like a baby squatting in my vintage bathwater and slither inside the book itself, because maybe it's just the prologue and epilogue they're skipping, and some books don't even have those, so they can enjoy those books just fine. Well, there is the thing that people say on booktok very casually as a fun little personality quirk in the same tone you'd use to say, I'm a dog-eared pages person. And it's some variation of this. I can't read more than 2 pages without dialogue. It gets so boring. Hashtag booktok, hashtag booktok, hashtag books, hashtag relatable, hashtag boot kicks. Like, just skip to the action. I don't care what they look like or what season it is, or if a bird is singing in the tree. Like, I'll figure it out on my own. Will you? Will you? They're saying it like it's a quirk or preference, like preferring audiobooks over physical books, or using a Kindle or reading on your smartphone. Like it's some form of reading where you get all the same information just through a different medium. But skipping the beginning, end, and most of the middle, that's not a preference on how you like to read. That's an indication of if you like to read, or even if you're reading a book at all. Now here's the one I mean. When you write a novel, the prose, the non-dialogue parts, the description, the narration, that's not the packaging around the story. That is the story. That is where an author's voice lies, or even tells the truth. That is usually where you find out what a character thinks when they're not speaking out loud, which is, if you think about it without speaking out loud, where most of the interesting things about a person actually reside. It's where the atmosphere of a place gets built in a way that makes it feel real rather than just described to you. It's where subtext happens. It's where the huge load bearing emotional backbone of a scene gets constructed before the dialogue lands, so that when the dialogue lands, it means something more than just what the sentence does. Dialogue without prose is often just a skeleton, which is scary because those are monsters. So what do you do? If you genuinely want to participate in reading culture, if you genuinely like the idea of reading, but the parts of a book that require the most sustained attention cause tension between what you're actually doing and what you want to be doing, what do? Apparently, you skip them. And you find, probably, that the book becomes more manageable, more like other content you consume. It's definitely less demanding of your attention when you don't force yourself to pay attention. Try to get me to pay attention to even a TV show without doing something else like cleaning when I'm already tired, and you're shit out of luck. Occasionally, I'll just have to turn off a film and start it again later because I find myself scrolling in the first 15 minutes, and I could not tell you a single thing that's happened. Which, is fine. You can engage with media in any way you want, but I think it's interesting what gets lost when you skip large chunks of what you're reading. Because what's being lost is the author. When you strip a book down to its dialogue and skim everything else, you are essentially re-editing the book before you've even read it. You are making creative decisions about what matters and what doesn't before you've even read it. And you are, in doing so, overriding the person who likely spent years writing this thing, who made deliberate choices about every paragraph, who put that long descriptive passage there on purpose because they needed you to feel something before the next thing happens. To earn it. You're not reading their book. You're reading a version of their book that you've produced yourself in real time with a very specific editorial bias pushing you towards speed and stimulation and away from the art as it was created. It's the for you-ification of someone else's art. You're swiping up in the book every time you meet something you're uninterested in. Which, again, whatever, do you. But if you're then going online and reviewing that version, the version you made up, recommending it or shitting on it, you are reviewing a book you objectively did not read. I don't know. That makes me sad. As someone who consistently has people discuss my work in ways that require the most bad faith interpretation of a line with all context stripped away, I imagine it really sucks to see people shit on your work in bad faith, or even praise your work in bad faith. If someone whose opinion I respected said they loved a video essay of mine, but skipped the beginning, end, and jumped forward anytime they believed I was about to say something inconsequential, I might think, wow, must have been a bad essay. So yeah, it makes me a bit sad, but then I remember people are monetizing their content and it makes me a bit indignant. When reading becomes a job and you get paid by the post, then the only thing standing between you and your ad revenue is actually reading the book. And the incentive there is to do so as quickly as possible, which of course may mean cutting a few corners or a few chapters. The moment you can monetize a hobby, the hobby changes in ways you may not have predicted, and reading is no exception. BookTok has created a fully functional creator economy built entirely around books, affiliate links, publisher gifting, sponsored content, paid promotions, art copies sent to creators in exchange for coverage. And none of that is inherently sinister, obviously. But it does mean that the incentive structure of the community is fundamentally motivated by things other than a person's love of reading. Because one of the goals of reading is now to create a deliverable. And deliverables, by definition, are for someone else. Or maybe they're not. I don't know in a dictionary. Somebody ask Webster. But it is undeniable that BookTok has genuinely got people reading who otherwise wouldn't have. It has built real community around books in a way that feels alive and enthusiastic and infectious, like a fun little disease. There is no objectively correct way to read. Skimming has always existed, as long as books have, and plenty of so-called serious readers do it. This is not a generational thing you can blame on Zoomers, because there are plenty of millennials in these comments echoing the same sentiments. Maybe they even started it. Likely, people who don't like reading all that much have been doing this while reading since the invention of reading shit you don't feel like reading. Even if they do like books. Because aesthetic appreciation of books and liking reading, while not the same, probably usually go hand in hand. Although I bet there are people who love reading and hate books, and I want to hear from those freaks in the comments. I bet you're wild. I know a lot of people also literally cannot sit through a book front to back, even with breaks, because their brain just doesn't fuck with it. And that's also chill. Not everyone reads the same way, for the same reasons, with the same intentions. I guess what I find so interesting isn't any one of these habits in isolation. It's the cumulative picture of a community that has, in part, oriented itself around the aesthetics of reading rather than the experience of it. Like a football team that sits around and just talks about all the cool plays they heard of, but never picks up a foot or a ball. I mean, if you go through all the effort to create an identity around something you don't really care for all that much, simply because you wish you did, I don't know, maybe you did put the work in. Maybe it's even more work than reading. And I bet a lot of people who legitimately thought they hated reading or had short attention spans eventually, through BookTok, found they actually do enjoy reading. They were just reading things that didn't interest them. And that is a win. The fact that these people are buying books, even if they aren't always reading them, also a win. This is in no way a condemnation of anyone. It's just a peculiar part of internet culture that drew me in immediately. I like to put all my caveats at the end because people who skip the epilogues deserve to stay mad about the author not including things they definitely included. If you see anyone saying, but it's not all of BookTok, reply to them with a dinosaur emoji and never explain why. I'll delete it if you do explain. No narcs. Anyway, enough of this author yap. I'm going to tear some prologues out of books I could have donated and throw them into the trash where they belong, as opposed to in the book they were in, where they don't belong. And I'll leave you with this quote. I agree completely. The epilogues and prologues aren't part of the story. If they were important, they would be part of the story. People write forewords for books. That's just another person writing about what they thought about the book or author. I assume that's what author is doing in the prologue and epilogues. If you love stories but hate reading or just don't have time, I have a horror audio drama coming out this year that takes the real dangers of AI grooming and pushing people to hurt themselves or others and forces people to examine if they'd be so dismissive of it if it were a person causing the harm. It's called Welcome to Isaiah, and the crowdfunding for it went amazing. And you should follow the channel on YouTube and social media so you can stay up to date when it's released. And actually, if you're a fan of the channel, please do. It would mean so much to me. It's in the description and up there somewhere. Watch the trailer, subscribe, leave a comment. Apparently, I don't know if you've heard, but the economy is bad. I've had $400 in patrons leave in the last 5 months because they can't afford it. I don't remove them from the Discord or anything because that would be fucked, but it does eat into my ability to eat. So if the economy isn't killing you specifically, please sign up for my Patreon. I'm currently working on a few investigations, so if you want to follow along with those and get secret information not available anywhere else, you can sign up for a membership on Patreon or YouTube and see them happening live in my members' Discord. Please do! My tax bill this year is about to send me into an early grave. Actually, I think I might just walk into the ocean if I keep seeing my debt go up as soon as I pay any of it off. Capitalism! I'm stressed! Sharing this video, even to your own email, tells stupid YouTube that this video is worth watching. So after liking and subscribing, do me a cute, huge favor and do that. Check out my podcast, Respect the Dead, where we talk shit about dead people who sucked, like Fred Christ Trump, Charlie Kirk, Elon Musk granddaddy, the racist who made Dilbert, and sex offender Coco the Gorilla. But next month for Pride Month, we're talking about gay people who didn't suck. And we're doing double the episodes. Matthew Shepard, Sylvia Rivera, Howard Ashman, and more. Check it out. Those episodes are important, but tough. I also have merch. It's cute as hell. Look at it. Something tells me you look so good in it. Bear my load. Bearing shirt and hat. Thanks again to Hungry Minds for sponsoring this little video. Love you. Stay gay. Oh.